Thanks to everybody who has joined us. It's evening here in the US, and I know all around Asia, and maybe different times. So, greetings wherever you are and what time it is. And I hope you are well and healthy. Not everybody in this part of the world is doing well right now, and I just want to acknowledge that. So, wherever you might be, I hope you and your family are safe and taking proper precautions depending upon the health situation in your country. But we're thinking about you here in the United States. One of the things that I think is so important, and you'll see this in the presentation today, is that one of the central themes of my conversation with you is going to be around engagement and the reality that engagement and learning go hand in hand. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about today. One of the other things I want to talk about as well as we get to your questions is a little bit about how you think about choosing a college when it comes to the different kinds of colleges. So Luke talked a little bit about the liberal arts, which is what we're going to talk about today in his intro, and I do want to speak to that. I'm going to try to make the case today that the liberal arts are worth your time and investigation. I know we have parents and students on here who might be eager to jump into the college search process, and I'm going to reaffirm what I know so many counselors on here know, and thank you for joining today if you're a counselor, and that is that the liberal arts colleges provide a different way to get a high quality, really engaging education. And in many ways, liberal arts colleges are sort of an invention of the United States. There is a curriculum that is connected to medieval education in Europe around the liberal arts, but the idea of a small liberal arts college is really, in many ways, an American idea that continues to this day. So it is appropriate that I'm here talking to you representing both a liberal arts college, Pomona College, located in Southern California. And I'll talk a little bit about Pomona as I go through, but I want to keep it as high level as possible. But also, I attended a liberal arts college. I went to Kenyon College in Ohio. I was a history major at Kenyon, and I worked at a couple liberal arts colleges. I've worked at a research university as well, and I have a graduate degree from Harvard University in higher education. And so I know what it's like to attend a bigger school for graduate school. And we can talk about that too. But, my focus today as I turn the slides on is really about liberal arts colleges. So let me get started and everybody can see that. There we go. Everyone can see that. I'm confident that. And so one of the things that I think is very important is to think about the philosophy. So when it comes to American higher education, unlike many countries, in the United States, you get what's called a bachelor's degree first, and then you specialize second. So, particularly for parents who might be here who have gotten an education outside of the United States, you might have gotten that higher education, you might have gotten that degree by thinking about a profession before anything else. So you went to school for a professional experience as an undergraduate and continued in that particular path. And that might be your profession today. So you went for medicine or you went for law. That is very common in other countries. In the United States, we flip it. And so you go to an undergraduate institution for a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science degree first, and then you go to a professional school for a law degree or business degree or maybe a PhD or maybe a master's in architecture. You want to be an architect or you want to be an engineer, you get a PhD in engineering. There's lots of professions in the United States where you get the professional degree second. And this is key to thinking about some of the differences between how the US works and how education in other countries, maybe your home country, maybe you're looking at England, maybe you're looking at Australia, maybe you're looking at other places in the world for higher education. They do work a little differently. And so I just want to point that out. Liberal arts colleges have what's called a liberal arts curriculum. And the liberal arts curriculum is really on it. It really believes and sits on certain foundations. And we have broken these down into statements that we call we believe statements. And it's key to understanding these statements because if you attend a liberal arts college, you will believe that interdisciplinary learning is important. You will study multiple things. Economics and art are totally related. I can make that case. Biology and French are related. I can actually make that case. Perhaps chemistry and sociology could be related. Lots of different ways of interconnecting knowledge, thinking about interdisciplinary learning. That's a very common way for a liberal arts college to present a curriculum. At most liberal arts colleges, about a third of your classes will be in your major, about a third of your classes will be in liberal arts sort of core classes, and about a third of your classes will be in electives. You'll have freedom and choice to take those courses. At some liberal arts colleges, for example, Amherst College in Massachusetts, a really great liberal arts school, they have what's called an open curriculum, where you actually don't have that middle group of sort of liberal arts courses. You're going to take a lot of courses, but you get a lot of freedom to choose what those are. At Pomona, we have what are called area requirements. And so you are going to take certain courses that really allow you to force you to be interdisciplinary whenever you come in. So different liberal arts schools think about interdisciplinary learning differently, but they all believe in it. And they all think it's really fundamental to understand how knowledge connects and why knowledge connects. And so interdisciplinary learning is important. We all believe that diverse voices add value. You're going to find commitments to very diverse communities at liberal arts colleges, in part because that really stimulates the learning. It's more interesting when you can learn history next to someone who's had a completely different educational experience than you. It's really beneficial to maybe be in a college where your roommate has grown up in a different religious tradition than you. And so you benefit from those life experiences because they're equal and they're valuable and they're important to the education. And so we believe that those diverse voices are really part of how you learn and part of what enriches the learning. As I talked about earlier, most liberal arts colleges require you to have some kind of a major or a concentration or some kind of a sequence. And this allows you to go deep in one area. So maybe you are studying mathematics, or maybe you are studying history, or maybe you are studying environmental science. That's what's often called your major or your concentration. But at a liberal arts college, you're going to do more than that. You're going to learn beyond the major. And so it becomes really important for you to take courses and engage in areas beyond the major. And so that becomes fundamental to your faculty advising. It becomes fundamental to your graduation requirements. It becomes fundamental to how you think and learn about the subject that you want to study that maybe is your major, because knowledge is relational. And learning beyond the major helps you to reinforce that knowledge is relational and connected. Most liberal arts colleges will put you in small classes. This is something we're very known for. This is often one of the things that is a draw for many students. And for the students on here, I think this should be a draw because you probably know that sometimes it can be really hard to learn in a really big class. That when you don't really have the teacher's full attention, or when the class is really big and your questions can't get answered, or when there's too many people in the room and you can't really engage in discussion because there's so many people that are trying to voice an opinion, it does make learning a little bit more difficult. You have to think differently about it. And so we see small classes as catalysts to learning. When you are in a class of 14 other people or 10 other people, or maybe at some liberal arts colleges, an upper division, an upper level class for a junior or a senior, a third year or a fourth year student might be 3 or 4 people, might be very small. You know that you're going to learn something in that class, and you know you're going to have the professor's full attention because you are a really critical member of that small class. So that becomes part of the identity of liberal arts colleges. And the final piece here, and this is true at liberal arts colleges, it's also true at universities, I think, but it's something that we think about a lot, very intentionally at liberal arts colleges. And that is that we believe not all learning occurs in class. Now, I know in most high schools across Asia, where most of you are probably at right now, you might be in schools where you have a lot of classes. I mean, I just read an application from Vietnam not too long ago. The student had something like 13 core classes. We had a student in committee in Brazil this year who was doing the dual Brazilian degree and the international baccalaureate degree, and had something like 20 classes between those two degrees because she was on two different degree paths: the Brazilian baccalaureate degree, so she could apply to Brazilian universities, and the IB degree, so she could apply to international universities. And that was a lot of time in class. But we know that you still need to do things outside of class. You can't just be in class all the time. Extracurricular activities, clubs, organizations, sports, maybe family responsibilities. Maybe you're entrepreneurial and you have a small business, or you sort of help out your church or your temple or your mosque. Maybe there's a place in your community where you help the elderly, or you help those who perhaps need assistance in some way. Maybe you care about animals. Maybe you care about healthcare and you try to do some work at a local nursing home or a hospital. We know that these experiences shape your passions and interests in high school. They're going to shape passions and interests at university. So when you come to that next level, you're going to have to learn outside of class in clubs and organizations. And so many liberal arts colleges have a lot of clubs and organizations. That is very American to have a lot of clubs and organizations in high school. It's very American to have a lot of clubs and organizations at university. This is something we do very well in the United States. So you should prepare for a robust and engaging extracurricular life outside of school. That is something for you parents. That's something that students should be doing. So don't yell at them if they're trying to find ways to do interesting things outside of class. That's important. That helps them develop. And they're going to be expected to do that at college or at university. And we want to see students thinking about that at the high school level. I do want to say a word about financial aid because I think financial aid is important. I know some of you perhaps are not going to need financial aid to attend university in the United States, but many of you will. And financial aid is an important part of providing access to higher education at liberal arts colleges, but also more broadly. There's terms that you need to be aware of: need aware and need blind. Need aware means that school is going to look, a college or university is going to look at your financial need as they make decisions. So how much money you need for financial aid may play a role in the decision. Need blind means that how much financial aid you need will not play a decision. The college or university admissions office is blind to your need. They're not looking at your financial need. Need aware means they're aware of your need. They are looking at your financial situation. Sometimes this depends on citizenship. I know some of you on here are probably dual citizens or US citizens living abroad. Most places are going to have different rules for US citizens than they have for non-US citizens or foreign nationals. Some of you may have dual citizenship or permanent residency in the United States. That also usually is sort of a different policy than if you are a student who only has citizenship with your home country. So you are only a citizen of India or you're only a citizen of Indonesia. That student might be read very differently than a student who is a dual citizen of the US and Japan or the US and Thailand. Those kinds of distinctions can matter when it comes to financial aid, and it's something you should do your research on because it's really important. There is a concept out there that everybody wants a free ride. Do you fund everything? And this is a tricky conversation to have in the beginning of a search process, because for many colleges and universities, they are going to be able to provide some financial aid, but they're generally not going to meet full need. They might do it through merit scholarships or they might do it through need based aid. But this is something that you have to ask and sort of be aware of. But just know that if you're looking for a full scholarship, there are not that many colleges and universities in the United States, just generally. There's not that many that are going to provide full scholarship support for students. Many will provide some, and many will have incentives through merit scholarships or endowed scholarships that they have, or need-based aid, which is how Pomona does it. We meet full need and we meet 100% of need. We have really strong financial aid for international students. But there's only 3 or 4 schools in the United States that are need blind for all students, including international students. So that leaves thousands of schools in the United States that are need aware. And so just be aware of that as you are doing your research, because that can become important. Parents, you are going to be asked to contribute to the higher education costs of your student. Students, you are going to be asked to contribute to the cost of your education, usually through a job on campus, what's called student work. For many of you, that is usually how it works, even for international students. There are jobs on campus for many international students. It's harder to get a job to work in the United States while you're a student because you don't have a social security number and you're on an F1 visa, usually. But the reality is that there will be some costs that parents bear and that students bear that are part of the assumptions of financial aid. My last point is the most important one. You should apply for aid if you need it. Don't game the system. Do not say no to financial aid if you need financial aid. And then once you're enrolled or you're admitted, email the office and ask to apply for financial aid. It almost never works. It's not how the colleges and universities budget their money. And it is generally not going to lead, particularly if you need a lot of financial aid, it is not going to lead to a good place, because you're going to have an offer of admission. You're going to have no way to afford it. And so affordability is very important. And if that's going to be something you are going to think about in your college search, be upfront about it and apply for aid if you need it on the front end. Next, I want to talk about application evaluation, because funding is important, but you, of course, want to get in, right? And that is also important. And so thinking about application review, most liberal arts colleges and many large universities, not all, but many medium-sized, some large universities, almost all liberal arts colleges use holistic review, which means that they're looking at multiple things. We want to see transcripts and grades. We want to see internal grades if you have them. We want to see external examinations. We do understand differences around curricular offerings around the world. I know that a 5 in Japan on a transcript is very different from a 5 on a transcript in Brazil, which is very different from a 5 on a transcript in Bolivia, which is maybe very different from a 5 on an international baccalaureate transcript from a student at an international school in Brunei, right? And so the whole idea is that we know the world's transcripts and school systems, and we look at those transcripts and grades in the context of the country or the system in which they're achieved. So we hire experts and we train experts in our offices to be able to know what we're reviewing. All right, and that becomes important. Some of you may attend a public high school. Great. Some of you may attend an international school. Some of you may attend a religiously affiliated school. That's awesome. All of those things are wonderful. We don't really prefer a certain kind of school. What we prefer is that you do well in the school you're in. And that is the key. And that's why transcripts, grades, and exams, some combination of those, are usually the first thing that we look at. We know that you might not be as involved in as many extracurricular activities right now. COVID has taken the world by storm, and I'm sorry for many of you, juniors who are about to be seniors. Many of you have been in a situation where you haven't been able to do theater, or you haven't been able to do sports, you haven't been able to do clubs and organizations. We do realize that. what we're seeing in applications is that students are doing other things. They're not doing nothing. So I do think that if there is space in your schedule, whether it's your role in your family, maybe you're taking on additional responsibilities in your family, or maybe your family has a small business and you're taking on additional responsibilities in that small business. Maybe there's virtual clubs and organizations that you can do. I've seen a lot of virtual Model United Nations and virtual debate teams formed over the last few years. So the kinds of ways in which you are being a leader, in which you are joining clubs and organizations, it's changing, but we are still expecting students to do something outside of class. And when we read teacher and counselor recommendations, these are things we look for. Teachers talking about a student's intellectual engagement, counselors talking about a student's ability to be a school citizen and an academician, a smart intellectual student in that classroom. So those are important because we're looking for those touch points of confirmation for your academic scholarship and your community citizenship. Those are very important. And of course, we're looking at your writing. So essays matter more than ever. Tell us what's on your mind, write well, rewrite your essays. Even the best writers on here, I guarantee you, your first draft is not going to be good enough. So please do write and then give it to someone, think about it, rewrite it, edit it, write it again. Make sure that you're putting down onto the page what it is you want to say, and speak from your experiences as much as you can, and also speak to your interests and your passions and your loves and the things that excite you as much as you can. College is as much about studying things you didn't get the chance to in high school as it is about confirming some interests that you may have developed in high school and want to push deeper. There is going to be a COVID-19 question on the Common App this year. We can talk about that in the chat if you'd like. That is a way to explain some of the changes to schools. Counselors may use this, students may use this. For many schools in the United States, particularly liberal arts colleges, optional standardized testing is now the norm, but there are generally three kinds of policies. There's test optional, where you can submit if you have it. You don't have to submit if you don't have it. The choice is yours. There's test blind, which it means that it doesn't matter if you have it. They're not going to look at it. So the school is not interested in your testing. And there's test flexible, which means that testing is recommended for certain kinds of majors, certain kinds of programs, certain kinds of areas, but not all. So make sure you're doing that research. Is the school you're looking at test blind, test optional, or test flexible? Because those are different things. And then finally, this is true at a lot of liberal arts schools and some medium-sized or some research universities, but not many research universities or medium-sized universities, honestly. Mostly liberal arts colleges. They're looking for optional materials, supplements, interviews, research abstracts. Those things can be ways to really allow you to stand out. I do want to sort of follow a workflow here because once students apply, parents and students, I want you to know what happens. Let's see, whoops. Yeah. Okay. An application, whoops, sorry about that. Okay. An application, I'm not quite sure what's happening there. Sorry about that. An application requires many people to complete. Students have a role, counselors have a role, teachers have a role. And I do want to talk about that. Application, after it's completed, the student submits the writing in the Common App or the coalition application or the application the university is asking you to submit. The counselor submits supporting materials like a letter of recommendation and a transcript and what's called an SSR, a secondary school report. Teachers submit recommendations, which is often are often based on the classes that they're teaching the student in. And all of those different things come together to form the application. The application is received, the review begins. People in my office and many liberal arts college offices will read applications in teams, or they might read applications multiple times in order to prepare an application for a decision. So I might read an application alone, but a decision takes place later. I don't make a decision when I read. I move the reading, the already read application into a committee. And you often hear about this decision committee. And this, at almost all liberal arts colleges that I know, this is how decisions are made. you're discussed, you're debated, people deliberate on you, they read your application, they read it again, they make notes, they make comments, we argue about you, we talk about you, we look at sort of all the things that you present, and then we either have a vote or we sort of talk it out to get to consensus and we make a decision. And that decision may hopefully is to admit you, because if you're applying, you probably want to go there. Sometimes it's to defer you if you're applying in the early round. Sometimes it's to deny you, which means that we're not going to consider you for admission. Or sometimes it may be to waitlist you, which is to put you on a waiting list to see who, if we have room a little bit later on, we might admit you a little bit later on. So obviously you want to be admitted to as many schools as you apply to. So that's why all the research really matters. But at the end of the day, there's two things I want you to remember. Institutions have priorities, things that guide their decision making, and that students have a responsibility to research fit, but realize that they have to understand the institution's priorities in relationship to fit. So at Pomona, for example, we have sports teams and we have an orchestra and we have debate clubs and we have certain majors. We are looking for students to populate all of the things that we offer at Pomona College. I can admit only so many students who have certain kinds of qualities, right? And so all of the students that apply to Pomona bring with them an individual set of qualities and skills. And I'm trying to create a class that has all the things that Pomona needs. We don't need 50 French horn players, right? That's not how you make an orchestra. You need some French horn and some violin, and you need some brass and some ensemble and some woodwinds, right? Same is true with sports, right? I can't have 25 soccer goalies, right? Or who would kick the ball to the goalie? I wouldn't have a team, right? So I need to make sure that I have lots of different kinds of students who do lots of different kinds of things and who have lots of different kinds of talents. And that is how almost all liberal arts colleges are operating. So just know that as you're doing your research, certain liberal arts schools or liberal arts colleges are looking for certain groups of students to be able to have the diverse and highly engaged communities that they seek. You may think all liberal arts schools are the same, and I would disagree. These are a couple ways in which liberal arts colleges have organized themselves. So Pomona is part of the Six College Group and the Claremont Colleges, but you also have another travel group called Eight of the Best. You can register for a session to learn more about any of those liberal arts colleges at Eight of the Best. You can register for a session to learn about the Claremont Colleges or the Six Colleges. You can learn about the Five Colleges of Ohio, which is all of the liberal arts colleges in the state of Ohio, which is in the Midwest of the United States, which is very different from the West Coast, where Pomona is located. You have the sisters, Barnard, Bryn Mawr, Mount Holyoke, Smith, and Wellesley. They are women's colleges, but they are liberal arts colleges for they are liberal arts colleges that educate women. And one of the things that is important as you think about community and you think about priorities and you think about mission, all liberal arts colleges are a little bit different. And so it is incumbent upon you to be able to do some of this research. The Pericles Project and the Liberal Arts Colleges Racial Equity Leadership Alliance, these aren't travel groups. You're not going to find these schools traveling together, but they are coming together around certain issues. So the Racial Equity Leadership Alliance is coming together around sort of racial and equity issues, issues of inclusion and access in racial equity in higher education. That's a big deal in the United States and in some parts of the world right now. So there is a group thinking about these issues that might appeal to you. So maybe you want to look at some of the schools on there because they might have a mission or values that appeals to you. The Pericles Project is a project that really focuses on citizenship, civic engagement, and active citizenship. So if you are someone who believes in those values or wants a school that has a mission aligned with that, those schools that are part of the Pericles Project may appeal to you. Some of you may want to be in a very different part of the world. So maybe the Five Colleges of Ohio appeals to you. The Midwest of the US is very different from the East Coast or the West Coast. It's a very different vibe. And so the five colleges there might be of interest to you. So think about that as your guiding principle, values and mission and fit, not about ranking or prestige. Yes, there are some, really maybe some colleges you have heard of on here. Maybe there's some colleges you haven't heard of on here. I know there's probably colleges that maybe the first time you're seeing them, but they're all committed to the liberal arts and all the things that I just said in a way that should allow you to, they should appeal to you in a certain way. And so I want to really just make the case for the liberal arts difference and why the liberal arts matters. And this is my final slide, but one of the things that I think is so critical, particularly for parents and for students. Why does the liberal arts matter? Simply put, because the world is complex and nobody is going to solve any problems if they just know one thing really well. And we don't live in a world where you can just study medicine or just study law or just study biology or just study economics and figure it out. Problems are too difficult. The complexity of the world we live in today just doesn't allow you to be so specialized so soon. And liberal arts colleges are really the drivers of not allowing you to specialize too soon. That's what we do well. So if you want your student prepared for the world that they're going to confront 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and lead in 30 years from now, 40 years from now, you want them in a liberal arts curriculum because it's going to prepare them to handle complexity. It's going to prepare them to manage ambiguity, and it's going to make them creative problem solvers. Why? Because they have spent time understanding how knowledge fits together, why interconnections are interconnections, why things that might not look like they should go together really do. And that creative problem solving is more necessary than ever. We have bigger problems than we've ever had. We need more creative, bigger solutions than we've ever had. And that's very important. And so, why does the liberal arts matter? Because it is the best preparation for an uncertain future. And you may have a career in mind, and that's great. And there's nothing wrong with pursuing that. But I guarantee you that what that career looks like today, what that job looks like today in 2021 is not going to be what that job looks like in 2060, in 2070. And if you've had a liberal arts education, you'll be just as good at that job in 2021 as you are in 2060. I guarantee it, because you've learned how to evolve and think as the world evolves and changes. So that is my pitch. I want to sort of stop there and stop sharing and welcome all of you back in. Whether you want to turn on your screens and ask questions, or whether you want to put some things in the chat, I'm not sure, but I'll hand it back to Luke for our remaining minutes, and you can walk us through next steps. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Adam, for that informative session. And we could definitely feel your enthusiasm and energy for Liberal Arts College and for students as well. That we can definitely feel that liberal arts colleges care about students' growth. And it's a fantastic curriculum, fantastic system opportunity for students. Advisors and students, parents, feel free to use the chat function to ask your questions. And if you want to kind of unmute your mic and ask questions directly, please use the raise hand, the emoji, the reaction function. Then we'll let you ask your questions. While we're waiting for some questions, I have some questions to kind of get you started.
Sure.
And we are based all over Asia, East Asia, and Pacific, and we do come across lots of misconception and limited understanding of liberal arts colleges. And one of the main one being liberal arts colleges are for a certain type of students. It's not for everybody. And then we talk a lot about interdisciplinary learning, small class sizes. And so sometimes people think that liberal arts colleges are not for students who have a very singular focus. So a student may have an interest in engineering, and they might be interested in learning some other things, but they really have a very strong focus. So should this student not consider liberal arts colleges?
Yeah, engineering is a good example. And in fact, there are some colleges on the lists that I gave you in the previous slide. Harvey Mudd, Olin, I think was on there. Swarthmore was on there. I know they are liberal arts colleges with engineering. So one of the things that is absolutely true is that you can be in a liberal arts curriculum in a liberal arts college and be an engineer. There's nothing wrong with that. I think one of the things that you have to think about is how do you want to spend your time learning? So if you're at a major research university and you are in a school of engineering, you might take 70% of your classes or even 75% of your classes in engineering and 25 or 30% of your classes in other areas. If you're at a liberal arts college and you're majoring in engineering or economics or business, you might take 35 to 40% of your classes in those areas. And you might have another 20 to 25% of your classes in broad liberal arts courses that you will connect to your area of focus. And you will take another third of your classes in another area. This allows you to double major. This allows you to have a minor. Maybe this allows you to study abroad in a foreign country or to have time to do an internship. And so the way that liberal arts colleges are structured are not to make you less of an expert. They're to make you better at the thing you're interested in studying, your major, by allowing you to understand and have time to make the connections that make that major relevant in the world. So Pomona doesn't have a formal engineering degree. We have a 3-2 engineering program with Caltech and with Dartmouth and Washington University in St. Louis, but we produce engineers. We don't have an architecture major, but we have alums who are architects. Pomona actually doesn't have a business major. We have an economics program, but we don't have a business program. We have lots of alums who are entrepreneurs and business people in Silicon Valley and in New York City and in cities around the world who go off and invent things. And the reason is because they understand the importance of creativity when it comes to problem solving, which is the fundamental sort of basic concept of a liberal arts college. The question I might also ask myself is, why do I think being so focused is so important?
Mhm.
Because I'm not sure that some students have a great answer for that. And the reason some students think it's important is because someone told them that's what they should do, not because they've actually taken the time to understand why they would want to spend so much time doing one thing. And the reality is, your ability to become an expert is going to take a lifetime. So, my pitch would be, why spend 4 years going really deep in an area that you already know you want to be an expert in when you're going to be an expert anyway, and you can spend time learning about how the thing you want to develop expertise in is connected to everything else in the world. So I'll stop there. I have lots of examples of this specific to Pomona and other schools I've worked at, but this question is a really good question. But I would also ask the follow-up question, which is, why is it that studying one thing a lot even makes sense in the first place? Because I would actually question that fundamental assumption that it does.
Wonderful. I mean, being an expert doesn't mean that you only study one field, and then you should know how to connect with experts from other fields to be truly successful. Even as an engineer, you need to know how to work with business people, politicians, lawyers to be truly successful. And then I think liberal arts education is really well equipped to give all that broad base as well as depth through support through majors, academic advising. One other misconception is that liberal arts colleges are not for shy students because the classes are discussion based. And we get this from a lot of Asian students. If you look at their school setting, they go through lecture based learning. They spend hours and hours solving math equations and preparing for tests. So they're not really used to the discussion setting. So they're afraid that they will remain quiet and then they might not get well recognized. But can you kind of comment on that? If your faculty member are kind of trained to, get those type of students involved in discussion and meaningful learning experience?
Yeah. So two things again, and I think this is important because I really believe that we should honor student learning styles. I really believe that not all students learn the same. And so I want to speak to the quiet kids in the room here who might be thinking, I'm a little shy. I don't know if I can do this. I don't really like speaking, but I know I'm really smart. Let me just tell you, we know you're smart. You don't have to speak in every single class in order to prove that you're smart. And you don't have to speak up all the time to tell the world you know the answer. So the reality is that it takes many kinds of learners to be able to make an educational environment thrive. And for some, speaking out, speaking up, engaging might come a little more naturally to them. And sometimes that is how they show themselves that they are smart and that they know the answer. They're trying to prove that to themselves. And that's okay too. Those externally driven, outwardly focused, more extroverted learners, they certainly thrive in all sorts of learning environments. But if you are someone who maybe you're a little quieter, maybe you're not the first to speak, but you do have something to say, you just don't say it first, liberal arts colleges can be great environments for you because that focus on small classes, that focus on faculty attention, that focus on advising and mentorship, that reality that not all learning occurs in class, which is one of the things that I put up there at the front end. All the quiet kids know that. They don't have to speak to the world to prove they're smart. And one of the things that you learn at a liberal arts college is that there's a lot of ways to develop knowledge. And there's a lot of ways to connect knowledge. And not all of them require you being the loudest person in the room. There are some loud people at liberal arts colleges. Don't get me wrong. I was probably one of them. And I went to a liberal arts college. I was a very loud person. But some of my friends were not. Some of my friends were a little on the quiet side. And I'll tell you what, they were often smarter than me. They often knew more answers than I did. So if you are thinking about that, I want you, first of all, to be okay with your learning style because that's fine. And second of all, to embrace that and say, if that's how I learn, then I need to make sure, no matter I'm an extrovert or an introvert or I'm something in between, that I'm going to go to a college or university that's going to respect that and that's going to support me and that's going to help develop me. Because learning styles are as important as anything when it comes to self-development.
All right, wonderful. And we are getting some questions on the chat. We got a question from Tokyo, Japan, one of the Education USA advisors. And this
Great.
is a question about financial aid for international students. Does it help for international students to apply through early decision or early action to be considered for financial aid? Or is there a difference between early action and early
That's a good question. And most places are going to offer financial aid in any round if they offer financial aid. Some may have priority deadlines, so that is something to watch out for. And some may have some policies on aid for students off the wait list versus students that are admitted in the regular round or the early round. Those are often the policies that you see more than no aid for ED students, but lots of aid for regular decision students. But the reality is it does often depend on the kind of financial aid that they're offering. So remember, often merit scholarships, which is the scholarship aid that a lot of people tend to focus on, those scholarships are often given out in regular decision rounds because they're designed to help yield the students. And so colleges and universities want to enroll their students. And in order to do that, they're giving them the scholarship and financial incentives in regular decision in order to enroll them. The incentives are not the same in early decision, though they may be an early action, which you've seen a lot more liberal arts colleges move to early action. So as a counselor, that might be something to sort of just look into a little bit for some students who might have a choice between an EA school and an ED school. But generally speaking, if you're looking at those schools that offer the most aid in the United States, they're not going to make distinctions between early and regular, and whether they have large merit or large need based. At Pomona, we have large need based. That aid is going to be available regardless of round. The only caveat is what I talked about earlier. You should apply for aid at the time you apply for admission because those are parallel processes And what most colleges want to do is provide an offer of admission and an aid award to make sure that your family can have an appropriate conversation about whether or not this is possible for you to attend.
Right. And then another question we got from Tokyo, does it matter if international students choose coalition or the common application? I have an impression the coalition application is for underserved applicants in the US.
Oh, that's interesting. So no, it doesn't matter. If a college has or university has signed on to Coalition and signed on to Common App, they've sort of made a promise. Essentially, what they're saying to students is they will not review the applications differently. So whether or not you apply with Coalition or you apply with Common App does not matter. I have seen this even in Asia. I've seen different countries. Some use Coalition more, some use Common App more. I read a lot of applications from Nepal this year. A lot of them were on Coalition for some reason. So I'm not sure if there was just sort of a movement there and they had a Coalition push in. A lot of my applications from Japan were on Common App, honestly. And so I don't necessarily think that I know there's not a preference. What I would argue, though, that you should think about is how many of the schools that your students want to apply to are on the platforms. So that may be a little bit easier, just because the goal is to do the application once and submit it to multiple schools, obviously. So if you have different platforms with different lots of different schools, it's just more work for the student. And ideally, you want to try to reduce that if you can. There's already so much pressure on the kids. Let's not add the application pressure more than we need to.
Great. I think we have like time for maybe two more questions, and then we do have two more questions on chat. And one of them is about the Claremont College system, which
Yeah.
the Pomona College is a part of. And is there an advantage, for being in the system? Are students encouraged to explore cross-campus learning?
Yeah, thank you for that. I do whole sessions on this. I did one this morning with students in India. And so the short answer is yes, that the benefit of the Claremonts are that you attend one school, but you can take classes at all five, and you live at one school, but you can participate in extracurricular activities at all five. So Pomona is the founding member of the Claremont Colleges. We're the oldest Claremont, we're the largest, but that doesn't mean students at Pomona just take classes at Pomona. They take classes throughout the consortium. And the same is true for a student at Pitzer or a student at Scripps who might take classes at CMC or Harvey Mudd or Pomona. So there actually is a lot of exchange. We have the same course registration system. So when you sign up for a class at one school, you can sign up for a class at all schools using the same system. That makes it easy. A lot of the extracurricular activities are 5C, so they're shared. And the dining hall card that you get to get into Pomona gets you into all the dining halls in Claremont. So there actually is quite a lot of integration amongst and between the schools. Pomona has 1,600 students, but there's 6,000 undergraduates at the Claremont. So it does feel a bit bigger than a traditional liberal arts college. Most liberal arts colleges in the US, just so you know, are somewhere between 1,500 students and 2,500 students. That's a very typical size for a liberal arts school.
Alrighty. And then the final question, I think this is a good question to kind of wrap everything up. It's about the admissions policies and application. Due to the test option policies, do you expect to see an increase in the number of application numbers? And then the follow-up question is, so if so, what should students really focus on in their applications? Essay, extracurriculars, and then you talked about how you debate about each applicant's application. What are some of the things that really stand out? What are some of the qualities that you really focus on during those debates and discussions?
It's a good question. I can't speak for all. I mean, there's been a lot written on the COVID bump at a lot of US universities because of test optional policies. But that COVID bump in applications has not fallen equally throughout American higher education. So some schools have been down, some schools have been up. It really has been, I would say, in a word, inconsistent in terms of whether or not test optional policies are leading to more applications. At Pomona, we did see an increase in applications. Some of our peer schools also did. Others did not. And so I still think, and I would hold true to this, that students should still do the tried and true method of worrying about what they value and what they want, and trying to understand how a college might fill the niche of what they value and what they want, and what that looks like when it comes to the students' desired options for higher education. The second part, which is the debate. I mean, I run committee. I read a lot of applications, but I run committee mostly, and they get pretty excited. I mean, the officers really like the students. They want to see the students admitted, so they have spent a lot of time reading those applications. And oftentimes, what stands out is a combination of student writing. Sometimes a student will just say something in a way that is so unique and different and well put that you read that file and you're like, this kid is so smart. They have to come to Pomona. They're just thinking on this big level. And sometimes it's in a teacher recommendation where they might say, I have been teaching biology for 20 years, and I think that this student has the greatest potential to do biology of any student I've ever taught. I mean, teachers do say that. And so the praise that they might offer is so extraordinary that you just think there must be something special in the student when it comes to their love of biology. So we have biology, we want that student here. But there's often a kind of coming together of lots of things: how you think and what you do, who you are and who you want to become, how you communicate who you're becoming. All of those things kind of come together in the review. And that's really the focus of the debate and the discussion.
All right, thank you so much. That was very interesting. That was very helpful as well. And with that, we'll close the Q&A session. Adam, was thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to kind of leave behind, like as a final tip for the students or the
Yeah,
advisors?
sure. Thank you for the ask. I appreciate that, Luke. And I just say thank you all for hanging tight. The number hasn't changed, so you've all stayed with me. I appreciate that. Hopefully, that means this was engaging and you learned a little bit. It was worth your time. The thing that I would say, and this is one thing to students and one thing to parents and one thing to counselors. To parents, trust your kids. You've spent a lot of time raising them. You've spent a lot of time developing them. You spent a lot of time loving them. Trust them. And in this process, the more you trust them, I think the more you will find that they're doing the things that you have raised them to do when it comes to the values that you've worked to instill in them. It always works. And to students, I would say your parents are not your enemies. They want the best for you. So when they suggest something or they bring something up or they talk about something, it isn't because they're trying to turn you into someone that you're not. It isn't because they're trying to make you do something you don't want to do. It's because they love you and they want the best for you. So just remember that it comes from a good place. Might not always feel like it sometimes. Sometimes your parents might annoy you. I get that. I was 17. My mom and dad annoyed me. But that doesn't mean that they weren't looking out for me and wanting the best for me. So just remember that. And to counselors, I would say you have a really hard job, but I think you have the best job because you get to see students transform over the course of the year or year and a half that you work with them. And one of the greatest rewards, I think, as a counselor is working with someone and you see them develop and think and change right before your eyes. And so, for that, I would just say from the admissions community to the counseling community, thank you. Because if it wasn't for you serving as those bridges for our students to help get them to that next level, we wouldn't have the great students at our liberal arts colleges and universities in the U.S. that we do. So I appreciate your work and I thank you for all the time you put in.